It's late afternoon, you're in traffic. Brake lights stretch ahead of you like a red river, engines humming, radios playing, phones glowing in every hand. It feels ordinary, annoying maybe, predictable. Then something changes, not slowly, not dramatically, just enough. The traffic lights ahead flicker once, no one reacts. Then they go dark. Every signal in every direction. Engines stall. Not one, not two, dozens. As if someone flipped a switch you cannot see. Your dashboard goes black. The radio cuts mid-sentence. The car beside you rolls to a stop and doesn't start again. You press your ignition. Nothing. Around you, doors open. People step out. Confusion spreads faster than panic. Some laugh nervously. Others stare at their phones waiting for service that isn't there. Above the skyline, the city dims. Office towers lose their glow. Digital billboards blink out. Elevators freeze between floors. Air traffic control screens go silent. Somewhere, a hospital generator kicks on. Somewhere else, it doesn't. Within minutes, intersections become gridlock. Within 10 minutes, the silence begins. No distant highway hum, no background current of machinery, no subtle electrical pulse that normally blankets everything. Just wind and voices. You don't know it yet, but what you're experiencing isn't just a blackout, it's a grid failure. And once the grid stops, restarting it is not simple. In 1859, telegraph operators across North America reported sparks leaping from their equipment. Some systems continued working even after being disconnected from power sources. Auroras lit up the skies as far south as the Caribbean. Compasses swung wildly. What they witnessed became known as the Carrington Event, the most powerful solar storm ever recorded. Back then, society ran on steam, horses, and early industry. Today, nearly everything runs on electricity. Banking, water systems, food distribution, communications, emergency response, fuel pumps, refrigeration, traffic management, hospitals, data centers. Modern civilization doesn't just use power, it depends on it. And unlike storms you can see forming on the horizon, disruptions to the electrical grid can arrive without warning. A solar flare traveling 93 million miles at light speed, a geomagnetic disturbance overwhelming transformers, a coordinated attack on critical substations, or a high-altitude electromagnetic pulse detonated far above the atmosphere. Different causes, same result. The question isn't whether temporary blackouts happen, they do. Hurricanes, ice storms, equipment failures. The real question is this: what happens if the grid doesn't come back on tomorrow, or the next day, or the next week? Most people assume restoration would be quick. Crews dispatched, repairs made, power restored. But large transformers, the backbone of the grid, are not sitting in warehouses waiting for installation. Many are custom-built, weighing hundreds of tons, manufactured overseas, and delivered over months. If multiple critical nodes fail at once, the grid doesn't simply restart, it fragments. Regions isolate. Some recover, others don't. And while engineers work to restore balance, the clock begins ticking in cities unprepared for sustained silence. 10 minutes after the lights go out, it feels inconvenient. 10 hours after the lights go out, it feels unsettling. 10 days after the lights go out, it becomes something else entirely. The modern world is tightly coupled. Energy, supply chains, communication, logistics, each layer dependent on the next. Remove the foundation and everything above it shifts. You might think this is unlikely. You might assume there are safeguards, and there are. But history has shown that complex systems are not invulnerable, they are efficient. Efficiency under stress can become fragility. So tonight, we are not asking whether disaster is inevitable. We are asking something more practical. If the lights went out, everywhere, how long would order hold? And what would you see in those first minutes, before the silence becomes permanent? When the power disappears all at once, it feels mysterious. But in reality, the grid is not magic. It is a machine, an enormous interconnected machine made of generators, transmission lines, substations, and transformers, all synchronized with astonishing precision. Electricity in North America moves at a frequency of 60 Hz. Every generator must spin in near-perfect alignment. If one region drifts too far out of balance, protective systems disconnect it to prevent catastrophic damage. That protection is both the grid's strength and its vulnerability. Under normal conditions, safeguards isolate small failures before they spread, but certain events do not behave normally. Take a powerful solar storm. When the sun releases a massive coronal mass ejection, billions of tons of charged particles race toward Earth. If the magnetic orientation is aligned just right, or wrong, it can induce currents in long transmission lines. Those currents don't enter your home directly, they overload transformers, and transformers are not easily replaced. In March of 1989, a geomagnetic storm collapsed Quebec's power grid in 90 seconds. 6 million people lost electricity. The system restarted, but it was a warning. The Carrington Event of 1859 was estimated to be at least 10 times stronger than the 1989 storm. If something of that magnitude struck today, induced currents could damage multiple high-voltage transformers across continents. Unlike smaller equipment, these units are massive, some weighing over 200 tons. Manufacturing lead times can stretch from 6 months to 2 years. Transportation requires specialized rail routes and heavy lift systems. If dozens failed simultaneously, replacement would not be immediate. Now consider a different cause: a coordinated physical attack on substations. In 2013, unknown attackers disabled 17 transformers at a California substation using rifle fire. Repairs took weeks. Authorities later admitted that if more facilities had been targeted simultaneously, cascading outages could have spread across regions. Or imagine a high-altitude electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, detonated hundreds of miles above the atmosphere. Such a pulse does not destroy everything in sight. Instead, it floods circuits with intense electromagnetic energy. Unprotected electronics fail instantly. Long conductive lines act as antennas, channeling that surge directly into the grid's core components. The result is not fire in the streets. It is silence. No visible explosion, no dramatic skyline collapse, just systems shutting down in a synchronized, irreversible pause. The danger is not in dramatic destruction. The danger is in systemic paralysis, because modern infrastructure assumes continuity. Fuel refineries require electricity. Water treatment plants require electricity. Cell towers rely on backup batteries that last hours, not weeks. Data centers have generators, but those generators require diesel deliveries. Diesel deliveries require functioning logistics. Logistics require digital coordination. Digital coordination requires power. It is a loop. When one part fails long enough, the rest follow. The grid is designed to recover from storms, accidents, and localized failures. But recovery depends on intact hardware and coordinated communication. If transformers burn out, if control systems lose synchronization, if regions isolate without the ability to reconnect, restarting becomes less like flipping a switch and more like rebuilding a nervous system. Engineers call it black start capability, the process of restoring power without relying on the grid itself. Not every plant can do this. Not every region is equally prepared, and black start procedures assume key infrastructure remains functional. If it doesn't, the restart timeline stretches. Hours, days, potentially longer. Which brings us back to the intersection where your engine stalled. In the first hour, people assume it is temporary. By nightfall, uncertainty spreads, because once darkness falls without explanation, human behavior begins to shift, and the shift does not begin with panic, it begins with doubt. The grid does not collapse all at once. It unravels. Electric networks operate in synchronized balance. When large transformers fail or regions disconnect to protect themselves, frequency begins to drift. Operators monitor this constantly. Small deviations can cascade if not corrected. If multiple critical nodes drop offline, protective systems isolate sections to prevent permanent damage. In theory, isolation limits the spread. In practice, isolation creates islands. Some islands have generation capacity, others do not. If a city depends heavily on imported power and that transmission link fails, local generation may not be enough to sustain demand. Rolling blackouts begin, then sustained outages. In the first few hours, backup systems activate. Hospitals switch to generators. Airports move to emergency protocols. Water treatment facilities rely on stored pressure. Cell towers run on battery reserves. But backup systems are not designed for indefinite operation. They are bridges, meant to carry essential services across short disruptions, not across weeks. Large metropolitan areas rely on continuous resupply. Fuel deliveries arrive daily. Grocery stores restock overnight. Warehouses move inventory based on digital scheduling systems. Remove power, and those systems lose coordination. Credit card networks fail. ATMs shut down. Gas pumps cannot dispense fuel without electricity, even if underground tanks remain full. Traffic signals remain dark. Police and emergency services shift to manual response patterns. The first day feels disorganized. The second day feels strained. By the third day, patterns begin to change. Water pressure drops in some districts as pumping stations exhaust fuel. Perishable food spoils. Pharmacies cannot process prescriptions electronically. Hospitals prioritize critical cases as generator fuel reserves dwindle. Communication fractures. Without reliable cell service or internet access, information becomes localized and fragmented. Rumors spread faster than verified updates. When systems fail silently, uncertainty fills the gap. Engineers call this a cascading failure, where one breakdown increases load on neighboring systems until they too collapse. But cascading failure is not only mechanical, it is behavioral. The longer infrastructure remains down, the more individual decisions begin to diverge from routine. People who would normally wait for instructions begin improvising. Some prepare calmly. Others assume the outage will end soon and conserve little. Supply chains, already dependent on digital coordination, struggle to reroute. Rail networks require signal systems. Fuel pipelines rely on electrically powered compressors. Even natural gas distribution depends on monitoring and control systems that require power somewhere in the chain. Black start procedures begin in select regions. Power plants capable of self-starting attempt to energize small pockets of the grid. Operators must carefully reconnect islands without overloading fragile transformers. Synchronization must be exact. If frequency mismatches occur, equipment can be damaged instantly. Restoration is a choreography measured in precision, not speed. If hardware remains intact, sections can be restored over days. If critical transformers have burned out, timelines stretch dramatically. Manufacturing capacity is limited. Transport routes may be compromised. International supply chains cannot deliver quickly if ports and logistics systems are offline. In that scenario, the issue shifts from outage to endurance, not whether lights return tonight, but how communities function without them. By the end of the first week, the absence of electricity is no longer an inconvenience. It is a defining condition. And as systems strain, the human response becomes the determining factor. 72 hours without power changes the rhythm of a city. The first night is uncomfortable. The second night is unsettling. By the third, the absence becomes real. Food that once filled refrigerators is no longer safe to eat. Freezers fail. Ice melts. Grocery stores close their doors, not because shelves are empty, but because transactions are impossible. Water systems begin to strain. Treatment plants require both electricity and chemicals delivered on schedule. Without consistent pumping, pressure drops. In high-rise buildings, taps begin to sputter. Emergency services operate, but under stress. Police departments revert to radio systems with limited range. Fire stations depend on stored fuel. Hospitals ration generator time, prioritizing intensive care and life support equipment. In normal conditions, urban life depends on invisible coordination. Deliveries arrive before shortages are noticed. Signals change without thought. Digital payments authorize without delay. When those invisible systems remain offline, behavior adapts. Some neighborhoods organize quickly. Shared supplies, check-ins, generators pooled, communication boards written by hand. Other areas fragment. Without reliable information, perception becomes localized. If one district experiences looting, rumors may spread citywide whether accurate or not. Fear amplifies uncertainty. Psychologists refer to this as disruption of social contract expectation. Most of modern behavior assumes continuity, that systems will function tomorrow as they did today. When continuity breaks, people reassess. By day 4, fuel shortages become visible. Gas stations cannot pump without electricity, even if underground reserves remain full. Backup generators require diesel deliveries that may no longer arrive on schedule. Traffic thins as vehicles run dry. Public transportation halts. Airports suspend operations. Hospitals face difficult prioritization decisions as generator reserves diminish. Water advisories may be issued where contamination risks increase. Boil notices become meaningless without functioning stoves in all homes. Sanitation systems degrade gradually, not instantly, but gradual degradation creates cumulative pressure. Urban density amplifies dependence. In rural areas, wells may function if mechanically powered. In cities, centralized infrastructure serves millions simultaneously. By the end of the first week, the psychological shift is unmistakable. At first, people wait. Then they conserve. Then they plan. Then they improvise. Prepared households draw from stored supplies. Unprepared households search. Law enforcement presence remains critical in maintaining stability, but coordination depends on communication networks that may be degraded. Community resilience becomes visible in real time. Some districts become cooperative nodes. Others struggle under strain. The question at this stage is no longer whether power will return. It becomes, how long can normal patterns remain suspended before they are replaced? History shows that societies under prolonged stress adapt in phases, not chaos immediately. Adjustment, negotiation, reprioritization. If restoration crews are making progress, communication about that progress becomes as important as the repair itself. Hope stabilizes behavior. Silence destabilizes it. By the second week, supply chains disconnected from electricity reveal how tightly modern systems are coupled. Refrigerated distribution centers fail. Automated warehouses remain idle. Electronic inventory tracking vanishes. Without coordination, resupply slows dramatically. This is not cinematic collapse, it is systemic thinning. And thinning systems test both infrastructure and character. The longer continuity remains broken, the more communities rely on internal cohesion rather than external support. Electricity does more than power devices. It powers predictability. When predictability disappears, the true architecture of society becomes visible. If the outage stretches beyond a week, the focus shifts from interruption to recovery. Grid restoration at scale is not a matter of flipping breakers. It is sequencing. Black start-capable plants must energize carefully selected transmission corridors. Operators gradually reconnect isolated regions, watching frequency stability in real time. Reconnection too quickly can trigger protective shutdowns again. Synchronization is delicate. Electric grids operate like orchestras, each generator rotating in phase. If reconnected systems are even slightly misaligned, equipment can suffer immediate damage. This is why restoration appears slow from the outside. It must be deliberate. But restoration also depends on intact hardware. High-voltage transformers are not interchangeable components pulled from shelves. Many are custom-engineered. Manufacturing capacity worldwide is limited. Delivery requires heavy transport routes that themselves rely on functional logistics. If multiple regions require replacement simultaneously, competition for resources begins. Priority flows toward critical nodes, dense metropolitan corridors, major industrial centers, military installations. Other regions may wait. That waiting period becomes the defining variable. Urban systems are optimized for efficiency. Warehouses minimize stored inventory. Retail chains depend on daily replenishment. Water utilities operate within carefully balanced margins. Extended grid failure forces those systems to operate outside design assumptions. Temporary generators can power specific buildings. They cannot sustain entire cities. Rural areas sometimes fare differently. Lower population density reduces demand. Independent wells, mechanical pumps, and localized food production create pockets of resilience. Cities rely on scale. Scale relies on coordination. Coordination relies on electricity. By the second week, adaptation patterns become visible. Communities establish informal exchange networks. Security presence concentrates around distribution centers. Public messaging, if available, becomes critical in preventing misinformation. Where communication persists, stability improves. Where communication disappears, speculation fills the void. None of this unfolds as sudden collapse. It unfolds as stress redistribution. Electricity removal does not erase society. It exposes its load-bearing beams. Restoration timelines, under favorable conditions, could span days to weeks. Under unfavorable conditions, months. Engineers prepare for contingencies. Grid operators run simulations. Infrastructure planners model vulnerabilities. But complex systems share one common trait. They perform flawlessly until the day they don't. Which brings us to a quieter question. Not whether catastrophe is inevitable, but how dependent we are on uninterrupted continuity. 10 minutes after the lights go out, you notice inconvenience. 10 days after, you notice fragility. 10 weeks after, you notice transformation. The grid is more than wires and transformers. It is the framework around which modern behavior organizes itself. Remove the framework long enough, and behavior reorganizes. History has shown that civilizations endure disruption. But endurance depends on preparation, communication, and cohesion. The absence of electricity tests all three. Return to the intersection. The brake lights, the stalled engine, the silence that arrived without warning. In the beginning, the outage felt like inconvenience. Then it felt temporary. Then it felt uncertain. Now imagine standing there again, not knowing whether power returns tonight, tomorrow, or next month. The modern world trains us to assume continuity. If something breaks, it is repaired. If systems fail, they restart. If disruptions occur, they are brief. Electricity has been so reliable for so long that it feels permanent. But permanence is not a law of nature. It is a condition maintained through constant balance. The grid works because thousands of technicians, engineers, planners, and operators maintain it every day. It works because supply chains function, because fuel flows, because communication persists. Remove enough of those supports at once and stability narrows. Not instantly, gradually. The difference between resilience and fragility is often measured in preparation. Preparation does not mean fear, it means awareness. It means understanding that infrastructure, while strong, is not invulnerable. History records geomagnetic storms powerful enough to disrupt primitive systems. Modern infrastructure is exponentially more capable and exponentially more interconnected. Interconnection amplifies efficiency. It also amplifies consequence. An extended grid failure would not look like cinematic apocalypse. It would look like quiet recalibration, communities reorganizing, households adapting, institutions prioritizing, some areas stabilizing quickly, others struggling longer. The outcome would depend less on the initial event and more on response. Communication, coordination, trust. When power disappears, information becomes currency. Clear messaging calms, silence destabilizes, which leads to a practical reflection. If the lights went out across your region, not for hours but for weeks, what would change first in your daily life? Water, food, mobility, security? How long would your household function without resupply? How long would your neighborhood cooperate? How much of your routine depends on invisible electricity flowing through wires you never see? These are not questions of panic. They are questions of structure. Civilization is not erased by darkness, it is tested by it. The engineers who operate the grid understand its strengths. They also understand its vulnerabilities. Governments conduct exercises. Utility companies simulate cascading failures. Solar activity is monitored constantly. Protective measures evolve. But preparation is not exclusive to institutions. Resilience exists at multiple scales: national, regional, local, personal. When continuity is uninterrupted, preparation feels unnecessary. When continuity falters, preparation feels invaluable. The silence at that intersection was not dramatic. It was subtle, and subtle failures are often the most instructive. 10 minutes after the lights go out, confusion spreads. 10 days after, patterns shift. 10 weeks after, society adapts. The question is not whether adaptation would occur. It would. The question is how smooth that adaptation would be, and whether awareness today shapes stability tomorrow. Because the grid is more than electricity. It is the rhythm beneath modern life, and rhythms, once interrupted, reveal how deeply we depend on their return. What would you notice first if that rhythm stopped, and would you be ready for what followed?